Welcome to Football Pass, where today I am joined by what I would love to call one of my dear friends, although we've only worked on a couple of occasions, but she's one of the warmest ladies I've ever met. Shelley Kerr, former Scotland boss, and now moving into the technical department at the English FA. Shelley, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Busy, and it's been quite a unique season, hasn't it, in football? And obviously, I've just got a new role, so it's been very busy my end. But I'm looking forward to the weekend's games, and also my new role. I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into a new role, which is quite exciting.
Delighted for you. Now, we're all excited to hear about this new role. So can you give us a wee insight as to what's going to happen within that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a role with the FE, and they are, I have to say, a really progressive nation, and they're really serious about women's football in terms of the investment that they put towards it. But it's a technical role, and I will be involved in developing and evolving how we play strategy across all the national teams, the women's teams, and I'll also have an impact on working with the national team coaches as well. So it's really exciting. I think for me, I've always said that eventually I'd like to kind of move down the route of, sporting director, technical director. So, and I think in football, you have to, broaden your skill set as much as possible. And I've spent many years, in different areas of the game. And it was an exciting role, and one that I felt that, certainly would tick all the boxes for me. You go into the intricacies, tactical and technical intricacies of the game, and then you get a chance to work with some fantastic coaches as well. So it's really exciting, and I actually started last week, so it's been really busy.
How was your first week in your new job then? I guess during these times it might be a little bit different. Has it been e-meetings, or have you got to be able to meet anyone socially distanced in person?
Well, for the first time this week, I did actually get to meet some people, which was great. But a lot of the meetings I've been on Microsoft Teams and Zoom, as we're all used to now in the past year. But it's been really good. I think firstly you're getting used to all the new processes and meeting people and having an understanding of what's already in place. But it's been great. The people have been fantastic, and it's football, so I'm going to embrace every single moment.
So let's talk about football, and everything around that sounds so exciting. But as you said, there's plenty happening this weekend as well in the women's game and the men's game. So I guess you'll have sort of followed the women's game up in Scotland very closely, bearing in mind you would have been choosing some of the players from the teams. What do you think of Glasgow City's run? They've been doing incredibly well, but this season Rangers have managed to catch up on them a little bit.
You have, and you've got Celtic as well that are bridging the gap as well. I think Glasgow City, credit to them, because they've adopted a new recruitment strategy, and it's quite clear that they've cast their net wide and far. And normally when that happens, it takes a lot of time, or it can take time for players to kind of familiarise themselves with a new country, but also a style of play and a system of play. And I think Scott Booth has done really, really well to integrate the players the way that they've been integrated so far. And, they're now sitting top of the league again. And, they've been formidable for seasons, for years. And, obviously champions for many, many years. But I think to create the best, environment in a domestic league, you need to have competition. So, Rangers and Celtic are bridging the gap. And Spartans have been really impressed me this season as well, because they're not professional, and they're amateur players, combining work and studies, and they've done fantastically well as well. So it's been quite an exciting season, and it's a tough one. Obviously Glasgow City are leading the way right now, but who knows, because there's some exciting games still to play.
There definitely is, this weekend in particular. And talking about the women's game, obviously yourself and your new role at the English FA, how much do you think the Scottish women's game has improved so far? Because it seems to be sort of getting on leaps and bounds, but there's still a huge way to go, isn't there?
Yeah, I think, I mentioned obviously the FA are really progressive, and they invest in people and their pathways, and that's so important. And the women's game in England is thriving. You only need to look at the WSL, but they're really serious about women's football. And I think in Scotland, there has been small steps, but I think there's still a long way to go. There really is. I think in Scotland we need to invest, and it's not just financially, but it's human resource and expertise as well. And hopefully, I think there's been a lot of work done in the background of devising a new strategy for the whole of girls and women's football. So hopefully that gets rolled out soon. And we see the rewards in Scotland for years to come. So, but they're definitely, we need more investment. That's hugely important. It's Rangers obviously and Celtic, because they're tie-in with the men's club. They've invested. Glasgow City have done fantastic for years, but we need all of the clubs to invest. We need the Scottish FA to invest as well and try and get commercial deals for our women's domestic product.
There's plenty to be done, but hopefully with this season being on BBC Alba and BBC Scotland, do you think that will help grow the game?
I think so. It's fantastic to see the highlight show that BBC have put on. I think it's great. And it's always about changing perception of the women's game. We're playing catch up all the time, and it's certainly evolved in the last, I would say, 10, 20 years. But like having the highlight show, it gives you another audience and allows especially young kids to see that it's okay to play women's football and this is what you can do. And I'm sure that once they review this season, then they'll look to change things for next season as well. It's always about, you can't always rest on your laurels. You have to always be one step ahead of the game. But it's a fantastic initiative that BBC have done, and they've bought into the women's game, and more of the same.
Here's hoping that they keep it up for the next season. So let's have a look at the men's game, because that's something that I know you'll do a lot of with radio and television yourself. You're on Sports Scene, you're on the different shows within the radio as well. So what do you think so far of Steven Gerrard's season, having just been announced SPFL Manager of the Season?
I think it's been incredible. I mean, he's one game away from, going through the season unbeaten, which would be a massive achievement, albeit they've got a tough game against Aberdeen. So it will be tough, but I think he's done a tremendous job. And, I've said this to a lot of people within football and out with football. You have to, when you're a manager of a football club, the average tenure is less than a year, and no other business does that happen. So the managers are under a lot of pressure. But what Rangers have done really, really well, and what's impressed me, is that they've given Steven Gerrard time to develop a way of playing. It's been exciting to watch. They've been, final third entries have been fantastic. They play an attacking brand of football, and that captivates the support. And I think it's been a phenomenal season. You only need to look at obviously the player of the year who's been up there in the shortlist, and it's all predominantly Rangers. Well, and certainly in the writers' player of the year, it's all Rangers players. So I think the PFA as well. It's all Rangers players. So it's a credit to the manager, but also a credit to the infrastructure at the club, because you have to have the right infrastructure. But he's done a phenomenal job this year.
And listening to you talk about that and the infrastructure that they've got, it's quite clear to see, I think, from a sporting fan's perspective, how well the players seem to support each other. I mean, whether they do in the dressing room and out with, but they seem to be quite a solid squad. Even when they're not playing, they seem to support each other. How important is that for you, for example, as a manager, when you manage the women's team, for them to be able to support each other, even if they weren't the players chosen for that particular game?
It's critical, and it's all about getting the right type of people. But I mentioned the infrastructure, and if you park, obviously, because that's about creating a culture and an environment. But I think for me, when you want to be successful at anything, you should have a long-term strategy, and Steven Gerrard's been allowed that to develop a way and a style of playing. And what I think he deserves a lot of credit for is that it's quite clear that you can see the squad, and not just the starting 11, it's the whole squad. They have an understanding of their task and role within the team and how to play. And regardless if they're playing or if they're, coming on in games, or if they're, even when they've not started, they're buying into the whole philosophy of the club. And I think that's fantastic. And as soon as, sometimes as soon as you have one player or two players that don't do that, it can be catastrophic. So he's got the mix right, the blend right, and of course it's always easier to get buy-in when you're winning games.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, I mean, just touching on Celtics, obviously their season maybe didn't quite go to plan this year, but do you think maybe that might have played an element if one or two of the players there weren't quite buying into what they were after?
I think there's an accumulation of things at Celtic. It's hard to pinpoint it unless you're actually in around, that environment. But I think the key thing for me was the recruitment, and recruitment's everything in football. Obviously at club football it is, because you've got to get the right players that fit into the system. I think what Celtic have missed this season is, players like James Forrest, who's came back latterly, been injured for quite some time, and Celtic always played, in a certain way, and they predominantly had good wide players, and I think they missed that. And the spine of your team is really, really important. They sold Craig Gordon. I think they missed them. You had obviously a massive presence in Fraser Forster before that as well. Well, in and around the same time, they didn't manage to keep him. And the spine of your team's crucial. They missed centre backs. Obviously Julian was injured. They brought in Shane Duffy, who didn't hit the ground running the way that everyone thought. And your central midfield area, where you've got Scott Brown, who has done a great job in his time at Celtic over the years, and that is really unique. There's not many players would achieve what he's achieved, but you have to have others there that can step up and take responsibility. And I think it's been a really indifferent season for them for many different ways. And people obviously look to point the finger always at the manager, and I'll always stick up for managers because it's the line of work that I've been in, and I think that there's been no difference since Neil Lennon left. There's still been inconsistent in terms of the way that they're playing, but I think a huge thing for Celtic, I mentioned infrastructure at Rangers. For me, that's what's missing at Celtic. I mentioned recruitment. They've got obviously a new sporting director in Dominic Mackay. They're about to appoint a new manager. So I think when they get that right, then that will allow them to obviously be more competitive for next season.
It's definitely something to look forward to. Maybe not so much for Hamilton Accies in the position that they are in at the moment. It's going to be a big weekend for the lower end of the table. What do you think?
Do you know, I really like the playoffs. I think it's a great idea. I'm not so sure that if you're in that position that you like them, but yeah, I mean, Hamilton, we've said it, seasons before that you could never write them off, but they're now in a really precarious position. I think they would need to have a 9-goal turnaround, which is near impossible, let's be honest. So it looks as if, they will go down to the Championship. And sometimes in football, you have to take a step back to go forward again. Hamilton have done very well in being, the survivors, serial survivors, but it's not to be for them this season. And, for one reason or another, I think they've suffered with a lot of injuries at critical times and in critical games. And they've got a coach who likes to play attacking football in Brian Rice, but it's not to be for them this season. And then you've got, obviously, Ross County and Kilmarnock that, it's going to be either or that, go into that playoff game against, well, I would assume it's going to be Dundee. They're 3-0 up from obviously the first leg against Raith Rovers. But it's been exciting and it's gone down to the last game. And that's what you want. Football supporters want to see that. Maybe not if it's your team, but certainly it makes for great entertainment. But I feel for Hamilton, I feel for Brian Rice, but sometimes you've got to reflect and think about, where did it go wrong and how can we get better and how can they bounce back, when they go down to the Championship next year.
Most definitely, and I guess as you've touched on, there's been lots of different factors this season, COVID I guess being one of them, but for all teams, but affecting everyone slightly different. So big question for you, between Kilmarnock and Ross County, I know it's going to be tight. Have you a prediction, bearing in mind Kilmarnock are away to Hamilton, who might have a fair wee go at it?
Do you know, I think that the one thing I would say about Kilmarnock is, and Kyle Lafferty, they've got an out-and-out goal scorer, and it was a brilliant bit of business from Tommy Wright to bring him in when he did. So when you've got him in your team, you've always got a chance. But, you know, Hamilton are going to go in there and play with, you know, nothing at stake really. So sometimes that can, you know, enhance your performance when there's no any pressure on you. So that will be a tough one. But even if Kilmarnock go in, Ross County, I think, only need a point. So it's going to be tough. But again, Ross County thinks Motherwell. So again, that's a tough game as well. And, you know, when you look at, you know, that bottom end of the table, people say, well, what's Motherwell got to play for? Well, they want to be the best of the rest, don't they? Yep. So, you know, between themselves, St Mirren, Dundee United, they want to finish as high as possible. So, I think it's going to be tough. And I really don't know. I mean, it's a tough
you
one.
don't have to call it.
It's a tough one to call, but I think that the fact that Ross County only need a point, but you have no idea when you play in these games and when you're involved in these games how much pressure is involved. And when you have that pressure, for me, the defining moments, well, the players that can cope with the pressure, those are the ones that can obviously get you that end outcome that you're looking for. It's the players that can cope under pressure the best.
And I guess you got a bit of experience there with Chris Burke at Kilmarnock, who I think seemed to be the only one with the ball for the last 15 minutes of their game against St Mirren. It's just every time you looked. So I guess with players like that.
Absolutely, you need a bit of experience, but you need energy as well. And sometimes young players, they play without any fear, but you do need experience as well. It's getting the balance right. But Chris Burke has had a phenomenal season,
hasn't he?
You know, for a senior player and a mature player, he's had a fantastic season, and you can tell that his career he's been fantastic. His technical qualities are there for everyone to see, but he manages the game really, really well. So he'll be an important player certainly tomorrow.
Well, it's going to be an exciting weekend. Will you be able to watch any of the action, or are you going to be working straight away?
No, I'm going to be watching the action. I'm got a stint on a sports scene tomorrow, so I'll be involved tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to the 3 games. And then I think it's brilliant how you've got the top 6 who are all playing on Saturday, and then the bottom 6 who are playing on Sunday. So that's exciting for everyone in Scottish football. So yeah, there'll be some cracking games. And you know, when you look at Hibs have already secured that 3rd spot. They've got a massive game against Celtic, want to test themselves before obviously the Scottish Cup final. And it is really exciting. Then you've got St Johnstone and Livingston. St Johnstone obviously have had their COVID problems this week, and you know, they've got a cup final to look forward to as well. So it's definitely going to be an exciting weekend of football.
Well, cannot wait to watch you. Is it tomorrow night, Saturday night you're on?
Yeah, Saturday night, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, we'll make sure we all tune in for that. Best of luck in your new role, and thank you so much for talking to us. It's been our pleasure.
Thanks, Ali.